Our first guest is Donna Laframboise, to give the proper French pronunciation.
Laframboise.
Laframboise?
Yes,
no, it would
so.
have an E if it were Laframboise.
It has got an E.
It has got an E.
It does?
What are you talking about?
Does it? Laframboise?
Absolutely.
Oh, we'll get there.
Laframboise.
Laframboise. Okay.
Didn't you have some this morning?
She's a Canadian journalist. On my porridge, I did indeed.
I think so.
She's a Canadian journalist, writer, and photographer with a degree in women's studies. She is also the author of The Delinquent Teenager Who is Mistaken for the World's Top Climate Expert, a book which climatologist Judith Curry says, quote, makes a clear and compelling case regarding problems with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which produces what is affectionately known as the Climate Bible, which, unlike the actual Bible, is, I believe, still subject to revision, hopefully for the better. She maintains a website, noconsensus.org, a website that argues there is no scientific consensus on climate change. On the other side, coming in for Team Climate Change is definitely happening, and I've been there as an eyewitness. British writer, world-class cyclist, and author of, most recently, Let Live, A Bike Ride, Climate Change, and the CIA, the first major novel of the human side of climate change. Welcome, John Madeley.
Thank you. Good to be here.
My question to you, Donna, is what did the IPCC ever do to you?
That's very funny. I am a journalist, and my background is investigative journalism. And I started doing some climate change research, and I had never heard of the IPCC, and I expect many of your listeners have not heard of that organization. It's a UN body. It writes these massive reports called the Climate, which are affectionately or informally known as the Climate Bible, and all the governments of the world point to those reports and say,
hallelujah.
We must be concerned about climate change because the UN body says so. So, and as a journalist, I never take anyone's word for anything. I'm skeptical of everyone and everything. And a really remarkable thing happened, and that's that whenever I started to do some very, very basic fact-checking about things that the IPCC claimed or that journalists claimed about the IPCC, I found that they were wrong, that the claims were false. And it wasn't just one small thing. It was practically every time I bothered to dig beneath the surface, to just look a little deeper than the superficial surface, I found
it's a pretty big claim, but
we were being
claim,
foolish. Yes, it is a big claim. And, you know, I've written 2 whole books that explain all of these problems. And it was quite remarkable to me. I've never seen a story like this as a journalist. Every time I think, you know, no, they wouldn't be that sloppy. They wouldn't be that stupid to do it. I check it out and, oh my gosh, here's another scandal.
Can I put this in perspective?
Yes, please.
The IPCC consists of over 2,000 of the world's foremost climate scientists. It isn't just one person. It isn't the UN body. And
that's not the case.
Well, hold on.
Well, it is the case.
Yeah.
Please, let's give each other some time. Go on, John, please.
Well, I've written about this since the first one came out in 1991. Like Donna, I'm an investigative journalist. I've looked at this very carefully as well, and I've come to very different conclusions. I've met some of those scientists. These are no fools. Their science is based, it is solid, and so I have to totally disagree with Donna.
So when I started looking at some of the people who are lead authors for the IPCC, I found graduate students, many of whom were a decade out from getting their PhDs. And in one case, I found a gentleman who had not even finished his master's degree, and he's a lead author for the IPCC.
Okay, my question
Go ahead.
there, if I may, Peter, is, you know, I only have a bachelor's degree, and part of the reason I didn't go on to get a graduate degree is because to be a grad student, you are under the constant supervision of some know-it-all dude with a PhD looking over your shoulder and making sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. You do all the grunt work. You count all the shrimp and say what's going on the seabed, and he takes all the credit. It is really hard to become a PhD.
Shrimp counting?
Well, no, yeah, I don't know that we had to put
some kind of
No, that's
weird
not a
sexual
metaphor.
thing.
They would stick us in a dry suit and put us at the bottom of the
Counting
Monterey
shrimps.
Bay, and we'd sit there and count shrimp in the seagrass beds. And let me tell you, that's nothing you want to do for 4 straight years. I think that's maybe a bit unfair. Certainly, most papers, the grunt work is going to be done by grad students, and they will be cited as the lead author, although the supervising author or the main person will be whoever's above them. Would that be fair?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not explaining myself well. The IPCC is basically a literature review. The people who are the IPCC authors are chosen for their judgment. They are supposed to look at this wide range of literature that has been published on climate change and decide which of it is most compelling, which of it tells us what's going on. It's all about their judgment. And if you tell me that this is 2,000 of the world's top scientists, and then I find out that the authors are actually graduate students, I have been misled.
What do you think is happening? Do you believe climate change is happening? Do you think it's caused by humans?
Well, I think the climate has always changed. We've had ice ages, we've had different geological periods in our history. The Earth, remember, is 4.5 billion years old. It has never been static. It is a dynamic planet. It is organic. It is always changing. So, when people say, "Do you believe in climate change?" I say, "Well, of course. Who doesn't believe in climate change?" Here in Canada, where I live.
I mean, let's not. I just want to try and be as clear and as simple as possible because so many people get so confused about this. So
That is a
always changed.
hugely contentious issue.
Do humans have some influence on the climate? I think it's reasonable to think that we do. However, from what I have seen after 4 years of research, the human influence is lost in the noise. We can't actually isolate it. So that suggests it's actually pretty small.
You don't think we can isolate it?
No.
I wonder if we could get this debate on what climate change, shift this debate, what it's doing to people. Again, I have to disagree with Donna. There are changes going on. Climate has always changed, that's true. But now, the level of carbon dioxide in the air has never been higher. The ice caps are melting. They're only 1/2 of what they were 40 years ago. This is unparalleled. We are heading for a disaster. But for me, the main thing is its effect on people, especially the poorest of the world. And I've seen that for myself. I mentioned Ethiopia. More recently, I've been to Senegal in the Sahel region. I've been to villages there where which were totally abandoned, people had to go because they just could no longer make a living there because the climate had changed so drastically.
It's pretty compelling stuff, Donna, isn't it?
Well, no, I'm sorry, it's not. Climate works on geological timescales. What happens in 10 or 20 or 30 or even 40 years? We have no idea if this is just part of a natural cycle of up and down.
We do have.
No, we don't. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry, we don't.
Well, this is where I would weigh in and say I think Donna has a point in that. When they say it's the hottest, for instance, the last 10 years have been the hottest decade since records were kept. And when they say since records were kept, they mean since 1850. So when you talk about geologic timescales, we're only talking about, 160, 170 years, which is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
However, when they drill core samples into the Antarctic ice and get samples of air bubbles from 20,000 years ago, and they go, wow, there's never in this whole range that we're able to test been an age where there's been this much carbon in the air, there's been this much, that the Earth's atmosphere has been this warm. It definitely gives us pause and makes you go, what are we doing? And if we are doing something harmful, what can we do to change it?
My point is that if we deny climate change is happening, we don't do any justice to the people who are suffering from it right now. According to the Norwegian Refugee Council, 38 million people a year are being displaced from their homes because of factors related to climate change. That is a huge amount of people. There is an emergency going on. It's all very well sitting in London, in Canada, talking about these things theoretically, but there is suffering going on now. What about the people who are suffering?
You know what? There are a lot of people suffering in this world. There are millions of African children under the age of 5 dying from malaria right now.
Because of climate change has contributed to malaria.
Well, you know, the malaria experts that I've spoken to really, really passionately dispute that.
Well, not the World Health Organization.
No,
not
the
World Health Organization.
malaria is clearly and demonstrably creeping north and south away from
an extra million
from the equator.
Cases of malaria a year because of climate change.
I'm looking at a study here. 11,944 peer-reviewed scientific papers from 1991 to 2011, and 97% of all those climate scientists say that global warming is happening and we are causing it. Now,
well, actually, that 97%, you do some Googling on the internet and you will find that is a very, very dubious number. There has never, to my knowledge, been a
Why is it a dubious number?
Survey.
Why is it a dubious number?
Because it's they've taken the people who did that study.
Do you know who did it? Who did do it?
The Global Warming Policy Foundation.
No, Donna, who did the study?
No, well, I'm not sure which one, but there are a number.
You're saying the people who did it, but you don't know who did it.
The people who are promoting that 97% number. My awareness of all of those studies, and there are 2 or 3 or 4 of them out there, is that they take a particular subset of the literature. They have definitions that are highly questionable, and that anyone who looks at these studies comes away saying this is not reputable. So to my knowledge,
that's not true. As far as I have done the research, and I can't agree with you.
Well, here's
I'm with you, Peter. I think.
Okay,
I mean, this is the problem. I just want to ask one more question of you, Donna. Then I'll shut up because,
please don't.
There's a lot of
Peter.
confusion in this area, and I know you don't want to add to it, Donna, but I think your book does probably add to it. And I know a little bit about some of the subjects, 2 of the subjects really. One is meat consumption and one is television. And you wrote about in your book a TV program that's transmitted here in the UK called The Great Global Warming Swindle. Now, this is a polemical documentary. It's broadcast on Channel 4. Channel 4 loves putting this kind of stuff out in 2007, and it questioned whether scientific consensus on anthropogenic, I can hardly pronounce that, global warming exists. And you say, I urge everyone, this is a quote from your book, you say, I urge everyone who hasn't seen it yet to watch it and make up their own minds. It's an important piece of history. That's what you say.
That's right.
But the program itself was actually the subject of a great many complaints, including from 2 of the very scientists who were featured in the program. And one of them said, I'm quoting, he said he was completely misrepresented. He'd been totally misled when he agreed to be interviewed. He called the film, quote, grossly distorted and, quote, as close to pure propaganda as anything since World War II.
Don't mention the war.
That was one of the scientists. Now, you don't mention that in your book. Why not?
Well, because I've talked to personally a number of the other scientists who were in that video, and they did not share those concerns. And
this is important. You see, this is where I feel you're biased, and you don't. I can't believe in you if I feel you're only giving me part of the picture.
As an investigative journalist,
that is the issue, really.
And
you
both
go
sides.
on. You say, I mean, a lot of people complained about this program to Ofcom, which is the UK Broadcasting Regulatory Agency. Now you say, I'm quoting again, Ofcom did not uphold any of the misrepresentation complaints against this program. Not one. That's what you say. You say none of the complaints alleging lack of due impartiality.
I am quoting someone else who says that.
Well, but it's your voice. You're quoting somebody else, and you're stacking it up as your view. And you say none of the complaints alleging lack of due impartiality in the science portion was upheld. Not one. But actually, you're not telling the whole truth there, are you?
I'm sorry, why am I not telling the truth?
Well,
Peter,
because
are you accusing our guest of confirmation bias?
it's not confirmation bias. What it is not giving me the complete picture, which I feel as a reader means I can't have confidence in what you're saying. And for example, I mean, Ofcom actually ruled the programme had unfairly treated the two main scientists, Sir David King, the IPCC, of whom you're extremely critical, and Professor Carl Wunsch.
Yes, but what did they say? The
Okay, well,
IPCC.
Ofcom, I'll tell you what they said. You asked me, I'll tell you. Ofcom also found this programme had breached several parts of the broadcasting code regarding impartiality. But the code rules on impartiality did not apply to the scientific arguments. In other words, the scientific arguments were not even judged by Ofcom. They were not judged.
That's right. And that is what
do you
the
know why
gentleman
they weren't
I was
judged?
quoting.
Because Ofcom said, I'll shut up in a second and let you have your say. Because Ofcom said, because the link between human activity and global warming had already been settled before the programme went out. Now, you don't say any of these things at all. Why not?
Well, because where I speak about that in the book, it was a blog post about other issues. So obviously I'm not going to have this great big long discussion in a blog post that is about something else. So
you're trying to make a case in the book, and you're doing it, as far as I can see, because I know a little bit about this and not much about anything else. As far as I can see, you're doing it by extremely selective argument. And as far as I'm concerned as a reader, that makes me lose faith in your complete argument, because you're giving me a very, very narrow part of the truth.
He's accusing you of cherry-picking the data. What say you, Mrs. Laframboise?
Well, I think there is a great deal of cherry picking of data everywhere in the climate issue.
You mean other people do it so you can do it too? That's not acceptable.
No, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm also saying that any journalist knows that when you write about a topic, you choose the details that you think are most salient and that are most important.
But you gave me a misleading impression of the program and the complaints.
Well,
it's not salient. You're actually, it's biased.
I think where I would come in, that what strikes me as bias, perhaps in Donna's book, is she just said that the IPCC was heavily linked to what was it, Greenpeace and other and third
World Wildlife Foundation
and the World Wildlife Foundation
Fund,
World Wildlife Fund. Yes, I always confuse the WWF with the Wrestling Federation.
Are they not the same?
Organisations,
No.
it should be said, that employ some excellent scientists.
Well, this is, and we'll get swing it back to you, John, in
Donna would agree with
just
you
a
on
moment.
that,
She has a point that the IPCC does have people with links to Greenpeace and the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, as well as many other environmental organizations. But they also have, and I'm looking at the IPCC's own, flight manifold. They have representatives from ExxonMobil, from Qatar Petroleum, from Chevron Energy and Technology Company, from the Boeing Company.
That's extraordinary.
From
I didn't know that.
3M Company Environmental Laboratory.
Okay, so now, first of all, I think we have a confusion. I have two books out, and I think that you've read the second one, and the first one is the one that talks about the World Wildlife Fund at some length. Now, the World Wildlife Fund, people who are linked to the World Wildlife Fund and who are also are IPCC authors, 2/3 of the chapters out of 44 chapters of the 2007 Climate Bible had at least one person, and in one chapter, 8 people with links to the World Wildlife Fund. That is extraordinary. And 1/3 of those 44 chapters were actually led by a scientist with publicly documented links to the World Wildlife Fund.
So
that is unbelievable. There is no
So what?
corporate
What's
body.
your point? Are you
Johnny,
saying?
so what?
Are you saying the WWF is some sort of discredited body?
Yeah, it is a body with an agenda. It is not a dispassionate, disinterested, neutral. You are not dispassionate, disinterested, and neutral scientist if you are employed by a group that has an agenda.
And the Atomic
Science-
Energy
It's a
Commission of the
highly
United States
respected
is?
organization. It's a highly respected organization.
The World Wildlife Fund is highly respected.
Well, it is in my book. Most people I know, in my own contacts with it, think very highly of it. Its research is excellent. So I'm sorry that you're attacking it the way you are, because I just think you're wrong about it.
This is what worries me really about voting for you, Donna. I mean, apart from the fact that I don't like the way that you put your book together, because it's in my view, it's very partial, and you only give me a tiny part of the picture that suits your argument. It sort of boils down to risk, really. If I believe and act on what 97% of climate scientists are suggesting, then, the world, I don't know, the world is going to be okay, basically. And what's the downside? Not much.
There's a great, there's
hold
a
on.
huge
I want to ask
downside.
you a question. If I believe you, which basically, it says, don't do anything, guys. Things go up and down all the time. If I believe you and we don't do anything, the downside of you being wrong is much greater than the downside of them being wrong. And that's what I can't get over.
Can I just point out the elephant in this room? That actually, Donna's asking for, or suggesting the IPCC is not actually objective, despite the fact that we appear to have proved that there is actually balance in the scientific input. But actually, Donna, you're not exactly objective. I mean, your stance that you're taking sells books. I mean, you must be
I
the
wish it
most
would sell. I wish it would
unobjective
sell a
person.
few more books, because.
But you have a reason to be making this point. You have a very personal reason to be taking the stance that you're taking.
Well, people definitely
Unlike
want
the
to be
IPCC.
climate change skeptics, for sure, because then they don't have to change their behaviors.
And something like, you talking about the 97, that they actually accepted some papers and not others. I'm just looking at the 2004 survey, which actually surveyed all peer-reviewed abstracts. You can't say that then they're pick and choosing.
Well, no, I'm sorry. There is these studies have been definitively debunked is not quite the right word, but there are the questions. The questions
Who's
around.
debunked them? I mean,
Which study has been debunked?
That one that actually said it failed to find a single paper that rejected the consensus position that global warming over the past 50 years is predominantly anthropogenic.
Who's doing the debunking and who's funding the debunkers?
Well, the funding, I don't know where the funding is, because I haven't seen
Koch
any of
brothers.
it.
well, we don't know that.
There was a rebuttal, but
At least
actually it
one.
said an inspection of each of the 34 studies reveals that most of them don't reject the consensus. So there was a rebuttal,
Right,
but that
but-
rebuttal was rebutted. And
Well,
but at the
you
end,
know-
you're saying you don't understand the scientific evidence. I don't think it's quite.
But Donna,
Right.
you do. I mean, that's a very valid point. Again, I mean, the risk of believing you, if you are wrong, is huge, isn't it?
Do you have
I'm not
children,
sure.
Donna? Do you have
No,
a
I don't.
condition?
I do not have children. And if you think I don't care about the planet because I don't have children,
I'm
that
not
is
suggesting.
really.
It's just a
It's
straight
cool.
question.
I don't have kids either. I just love my coral reefs, and I'd sure like for them to survive. Pete, and at this is almost a fundamentalist argument that you're making, Pete, in the sense that if you don't believe in the kingdom of the Lord and in Jesus Christ, if you're if you're wrong and they're right, then come the afterlife.
I'm just arguing in favour of the precautionary principle, really.
Well, exactly. I wanted
How
to
is
say
that different than Pascal's wager?
I've no
This has
idea.
been
Well,
an
Pascal
red
got
herring.
paid. Did he get paid to do his job? I don't
Actually,
know.
Pascal's wager, he did double down and made some serious bank. Anyways, as you were.
Surely the precautionary principle means that we must act on the evidence that we have. My passion, one of them, is my 5 grandchildren. What future for them am I leaving them? If I go on like this, what kind of future am I leaving them? Because it seems to be pretty bleak unless I change personally, and we can all do something. If we all do something, it can make a difference.